Have you ever stood behind someone in line at a grocery store and thought, how is it taking this long to buy a few pieces of fruit? Maybe you've seen it before. Someone picks up an apple, puts it back, picks up another one, asks the price, then asks why it's cheaper than the one next to it, then wonders if the scale is accurate, then asks where it came from, then debates whether they should buy 3 or 4. 10 minutes later, they finally make a decision. Now, there's nothing wrong with asking questions. In fact, being careful with your money is a good thing. Nobody is saying you should blindly buy the first thing you see. But here's something interesting. For some people, this isn't just how they shop, it's how they live. Every decision becomes a battle. Every choice feels dangerous. Every opportunity comes with endless what-ifs. And before they know it, they've spent so much time trying to avoid making the wrong decision that they never make a meaningful one at all. That's what today's video is about. Not peaches, not grocery shopping, but a mindset that quietly steals opportunities, drains your energy, and keeps people stuck far longer than they realize. It's called overthinking. And the scary part? Most people don't even know they're doing it. They think they're being smart. They think they're being cautious. They think they're protecting themselves. But sometimes what feels like careful thinking is actually fear wearing a very convincing disguise. Think about the last time you had to make an important decision. Maybe it was changing jobs, starting a business, moving to a new city, asking someone out, investing your savings. How much time did you spend researching, watching YouTube videos, reading reviews, asking friends, comparing options, making pros and cons lists, then making another pros and cons list because the first one didn't feel complete? Sound familiar? Here's the truth that many successful people eventually learn. Information is valuable, but after a certain point, more information doesn't make you smarter, it just makes you more confused. There's actually a name for this in psychology: analysis paralysis. The more options we have, the harder it becomes to choose. Instead of feeling confident, we become overwhelmed. Instead of taking action, we keep waiting for perfect certainty. The problem is, perfect certainty never arrives. Life doesn't work that way. Every decision comes with uncertainty. No matter how intelligent you are, no matter how much research you've done, no matter how many experts you listen to, eventually there comes a point where you simply have to decide. And that's where many people get stuck. They tell themselves they're still thinking, but weeks turn into months. Months turn into years. The opportunity quietly disappears while they're still trying to figure out the perfect answer. What's fascinating is that this habit doesn't just affect big life decisions. It shows up everywhere. Some people spend 45 minutes deciding what to order at a restaurant. Others spend 3 months choosing a laptop. Some compare 20 different brands before buying a pair of headphones that they'll replace in 2 years anyway. Again, researching isn't the problem. The problem is when the cost of making the decision becomes greater than the decision itself. Imagine spending 6 hours trying to save $10. Did you really save money? Or did you spend 6 hours of your life for the price of 2 cups of coffee? Time has value. Energy has value. Mental focus has value. Yet many people only measure dollars. That's a dangerous way to think because money isn't the only thing you're spending. Every decision consumes attention, and attention is limited. Think of your brain like a phone battery. Every unnecessary decision drains a little bit of power. By the time something truly important comes along, you're already exhausted.
That's one reason highly productive people often simplify small decisions. They don't want to waste mental energy choosing between 50 nearly identical options. They'd rather save that energy for decisions that actually change their lives. Here's another interesting observation. People who constantly worry about being taken advantage of often end up trusting nobody. They question every price, every offer, every promise, every relationship. Now, healthy skepticism is important. There are dishonest people in the world. Scams exist, bad deals exist. But living as if everyone is trying to cheat you comes with its own cost. It creates stress. It damages relationships. And sometimes it causes you to miss genuine opportunities because you're too busy looking for hidden traps. Ironically, people who fear losing a little end up losing a lot, not because they're unlucky, but because fear keeps them from moving. Imagine two people standing at the edge of a river. One waits until every single condition is perfect before crossing. The water must be calm, the weather must be perfect, the bridge must feel completely safe. The other checks that the bridge is reasonably solid, accepts that there's always some risk, and starts walking. Who reaches the other side first? Life rewards movement more than often hesitation. That doesn't mean rushing into reckless decisions. It means recognizing that action creates experience. Experience creates confidence. Confidence makes future decisions easier. Waiting rarely creates confidence. Action does. The people we admire aren't usually the ones who made perfect choices. They're the ones who made enough choices to learn quickly. Every entrepreneur has failed at something. Every athlete has lost important competitions. Every successful creator has made terrible videos, written bad articles, or launched projects that nobody cared about. They didn't become successful because they avoided mistakes. They became successful because they stopped treating every decision like it had to be perfect. They understood something simple. You can recover from a bad decision much faster than you can recover from years of doing nothing. That's the hidden cost of overthinking. It doesn't just delay action, it slowly convinces you that waiting is progress, that researching is progress, that planning is progress. Sometimes those things are progress, but eventually progress requires movement, real action. Because at the end of the day, your life isn't shaped by the number of ideas you considered, it's shaped by the decisions you actually made. And if there's one idea I hope you remember from this video, it's this. Being thoughtful is a strength. Being careful is a strength. But when caution turns into constant hesitation, it stops protecting your future and starts preventing it. The goal isn't to make perfect decisions. The goal is to make good decisions, learn from them, and keep moving forward. Because opportunities rarely wait for people who are still trying to be 100% certain.
Have you ever noticed that some people will spend an entire afternoon trying to save $10? They'll drive across town because the gas is a little cheaper. They'll visit 3 different supermarkets to find the lowest price on groceries. They'll spend hours comparing products online, watching hundreds of reviews, watching comparison videos, and refreshing price trackers. Finally, after all that effort, they save a small amount of money. It feels like a win. But is it? Let's look at the bigger picture. Imagine someone tells you they saved $20 today. Sounds great. Then they mention they spent 4 hours doing it. Suddenly, it doesn't sound so impressive anymore. Because money is only one resource. Time is another. Energy is another. Focus is another. And unlike money, you can never earn back the time you've already spent. That's why one of the biggest mindset shifts successful people make is learning to value their time just as much as their money. Money can disappear and come back. Time only moves in one direction. Yet many of us are trained from childhood to focus almost entirely on saving money. We celebrate discounts, we hunt for coupons, we compare prices endlessly. There's nothing wrong with being financially responsible. The problem begins when saving a little money costs you something much more valuable. Think about your daily decisions. Have you ever spent 30 minutes deciding which streaming service to subscribe to because one costs $5 less? Have you ever delayed buying something you genuinely needed because you couldn't decide whether another website might offer a slightly better deal? Have you ever spent hours researching a purchase that you'll probably forget about 6 months later? Most of us have. The funny thing is, we rarely notice how much mental energy these decisions consume. Psychologists sometimes talk about something called decision fatigue. The basic idea is simple. Every decision you make uses a small amount of your mental energy. What should I wear? What should I eat? Should I buy this today? Should I wait until next week? Should I choose brand A or brand B? None of these decisions seems difficult by itself, but together, they slowly wear your brain down. By the end of the day, your ability to think clearly becomes weaker. That's why people often make their worst decisions when they're mentally exhausted. Not because they're less intelligent, because they simply have less mental energy left. Now imagine someone who turns every tiny choice into a major investigation. Every purchase becomes a research project. Every decision becomes a debate. Every option creates anxiety. Their brain never gets a break. They're constantly solving problems that don't actually matter that much. Meanwhile, truly important decisions like learning a new skill, starting a side business, improving their health, or strengthening relationships receive whatever energy happens to be left over. That's backwards. Your biggest investments shouldn't be in finding the cheapest toothpaste. They should be in building the kind of life where the price of toothpaste barely matters. There's an old saying in business. Poor people ask, how much does it cost? Wealthy people ask, what's the return? Now, that doesn't mean wealthy people waste money. Far from it. Many successful people are incredibly disciplined with spending. The difference is what they optimize for. They don't just ask whether something is cheaper, they ask whether it's worth it. Those are completely different questions. Let's say you have two gyms to choose from. One costs $30 a month, the other costs $80. If the cheaper gym is 40 minutes away, crowded all the time, and makes you skip workouts because getting there is a hassle, was it really the cheaper option? Now imagine the more expensive gym is 5 minutes from your home. It's clean, it's convenient, you actually go 4 times a week. Over a year, which membership gave you more value? The answer isn't found on the receipt, it's found in your habits. Convenience isn't just comfort. Sometimes it's an investment in consistency. The same idea applies to almost everything in life. Books, courses, transportation, healthy food, even where you choose to live. People often focus on visible costs while ignoring invisible costs. The visible cost is easy to measure. The invisible costs are harder to see. Stress, lost sleep, long commutes, constant interruptions, emotional exhaustion, reduced productivity, lost opportunities. Those costs rarely appear on a credit card statement, but they're often much larger than the money you thought you saved. Imagine two people earning exactly the same salary. The first person spends an extra hour every morning sitting in traffic because the rent is slightly cheaper. The second person pays more to live closer to work. At first glance, the first person seems more financially responsible, but after a year, the second person has gained hundreds of extra hours. Hours that can be spent exercising, learning new skills, building friendships, working on a side business, simply getting enough sleep. Those hours compound, just like money compounds. Small daily choices create enormous differences over time. That's one of the biggest lessons life teaches us. Efficiency isn't about doing everything as cheaply as possible. It's about using your limited resources wisely. And your most limited resource isn't cash. It's your attention. Attention determines where your life goes. Whatever constantly demands your attention eventually shapes your future. If all your attention goes towards avoiding tiny losses, you may never notice the much larger opportunities passing by. Think about the entrepreneurs who build successful companies. Do they obsess over saving $3 on office supplies? Usually not. They're focused on solving bigger problems, creating more value, making better decisions, growing faster. Because they understand something important. Major results rarely come from tiny optimizations. They come from making meaningful improvements where they matter most. This doesn't mean you should become careless with money. That's not the lesson. The lesson is balance. Save where it makes sense, spend where it creates genuine value. Don't confuse being cheap with being wise. Sometimes paying more buys you freedom. Sometimes paying more buys you time. Sometimes paying more protects your peace of mind. And those things are often much more valuable than the money itself. The people who move forward in life aren't necessarily the ones who spend the least. They're the ones who understand the difference between an expense and an investment. An expense takes money away. An investment gives something valuable back. The trick is learning to recognize the difference. Because once you start valuing your time, your energy, your focus, and your peace of mind as highly as your bank account, you'll begin making decisions that don't just save money, they improve your life.
Have you ever looked back on your life and thought, I almost did it? Maybe you almost started a business, almost moved to another city, almost asked someone out, almost applied for your dream job, almost invested before prices took off, almost wrote the book, almost started the YouTube channel. The word almost has probably stolen more dreams than failure ever has. Failure hurts, but at least failure means you tried. Almost means you never gave yourself the chance to find out what could have happened. One of the biggest myths people believe is that opportunities stay around forever. They don't. Almost every opportunity has a window, and that window eventually closes. Think about how life actually works. A company is hiring. Your dream position becomes available. You tell yourself, I'll polish my resume a little more. I'll apply next week. I should probably take one more course first. By the time you finally feel ready, the position is gone. Someone else got it. The opportunity didn't disappear because you weren't talented enough. It disappeared because you waited. The same thing happens in business. Imagine you've been thinking about opening a coffee shop for years. You research equipment, watch videos, study marketing, calculate every possible expense. Months go by, then years. Finally, you find the courage to start, only to discover that someone else opened a cafe in exactly the neighborhood you had in mind. They're already building loyal customers while you're still making spreadsheets. This isn't bad luck. It's the cost of hesitation. The world rewards people who take thoughtful action, not people who wait forever for certainty. Relationships work the same way. Maybe you've met someone you genuinely like. The conversations feel natural, there's chemistry. You think they might like you too. But instead of asking them out, you spend weeks analyzing every text message. Did they really mean that? Maybe they're just being polite. What if I ruin the friendship? I'll wait for a better moment. Then one day they post a photo with someone else. Suddenly, the decision has been made for you, not by them, by your hesitation. Now, to be clear, acting quickly doesn't guarantee success. Sometimes you'll still hear no. Sometimes you'll still fail. Sometimes things won't work out. But there's a huge difference between being rejected and rejecting yourself before life even has the chance. Many people lose opportunities long before anyone else says no. They talk themselves out of trying. Psychologists have found that people often regret the things they didn't do more than the things they did, especially as they get older. Think about that for a moment. Embarrassment usually fades. Failure teaches lessons, but unanswered questions can stay with you for decades. What if I had gone? What if I had tried? What if I had taken that chance? Those questions don't have easy answers. That's why they're so powerful. Life doesn't always punish bad decisions. Sometimes it punishes delayed decisions. There's a reason investors often say that timing matters. The same investment can produce completely different results depending on when you enter. The same is true of careers. The same is true of relationships. The same is true of learning new skills. There are moments when taking action creates momentum. Miss those moments, and you'll often need far more effort later just to achieve the same result. Imagine trying to catch a train. If you arrive 5 minutes early, everything is easy. If you arrive 30 seconds late, it doesn't matter how fast you can run. The train is already gone. Many opportunities work exactly like that, not because life is unfair, because timing is part of the opportunity itself. This is why decisive people often seem lucky. People look at them and say, everything works out for them. But if you pay closer attention, you'll notice something different. They simply act while everyone else is still debating. When a good opportunity appears, they don't spend 6 months asking whether it's absolutely perfect. They ask a different question. Is this good enough to move forward? That's an incredibly powerful habit. Perfection asks for certainty. Progress asks for action. Those are two completely different mindsets. Here's something else worth thinking about. Every decision has two possible costs: the cost of making the wrong choice and the cost of making no choice at all. Most people obsess over the first one. Very few think seriously about the second. Suppose you're considering learning a new skill, maybe coding, maybe public speaking, maybe video editing. You spend 2 years trying to decide which course is the absolute best. Meanwhile, someone else picks a decent course, not a perfect one, and starts learning immediately. 2 years later, who has the advantage? The person with the perfect plan, or the person with 2 years of real experience? Experience almost always beats endless preparation. That's one reason successful people become increasingly comfortable with imperfect action. They understand they can adjust as they go. They don't need every answer before taking the first step. Imagine trying to learn how to ride a bicycle by reading books alone. You could study balance, watch tutorials, learn about the physics of motion, read interviews with Olympic cyclists, but eventually you have to get on the bike. And yes, you'll probably wobble. You might even fall. But that's how balance is learned, not through endless thinking, through movement. Life works much the same way. Confidence isn't something you collect before you act. Confidence is usually something you earn because you acted. Every small decision builds evidence. Every attempt teaches something. Every success, or even every mistake, makes the next decision a little easier. People who appear naturally confident weren't born that way. They simply have years of practice making decisions. They've learned that most mistakes are survivable, most setbacks are temporary, most fears are exaggerated, and most opportunities don't wait forever. The longer you spend trying to eliminate every possible risk, the more likely you are to lose the opportunity entirely. That's the hidden price of hesitation. It quietly replaces possibility with regret. So the next time life places an opportunity in front of you, don't ask whether you can predict every outcome. Ask yourself something much simpler. If I don't take this chance, will I regret never knowing where it could have led? Because more often than not, the greatest risk isn't making the wrong move. It's standing still while life keeps moving without you.
Have you ever noticed that some people seem to catch every lucky break? They land better jobs. They meet the right people. They start businesses at the right time. They seem to be in the right place when opportunities appear. From the outside, it looks like luck. But if you spend enough time around successful people, you start to notice something different. They're not necessarily smarter. They're not always more talented. And they're certainly not fearless. What separates them is surprisingly simple. They make decisions. While everyone else is still thinking, they're already moving. That doesn't mean they're reckless. It doesn't mean they ignore risks. It means they've accepted a truth that many people spend years resisting. There is no such thing as a risk-free decision. Every path has uncertainty. Starting a business is risky. Staying in a job you hate is risky too. Moving to a new city is risky. Never leaving your comfort zone is also risky. Investing your money carries uncertainty. Doing nothing while inflation slowly reduces its value carries uncertainty as well. People often compare action to perfection. They ask, what if this doesn't work out? A better question might be, what happens if I never try? Because doing nothing isn't the absence of risk. It's simply choosing a different kind of risk. The problem is that the risks of inaction are much harder to see. If you start a business and fail, everyone notices. If you spend 10 years dreaming about starting one but never do it, almost nobody notices. But your future certainly does. Invisible losses are still losses. Think about someone who has wanted to change careers for years. Every January they say, "This is the year." They buy a notebook, watch motivational videos, research different industries, maybe even sign up for an online course. But they never actually apply for jobs. They never build a portfolio. They never send the first email. 5 years later, they're still having the same conversation with themselves. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack ability, because every year they convince themselves that next year will somehow feel easier. It rarely does. Action creates momentum. Waiting usually creates more waiting. One delay makes the next delay easier. One excuse makes the next excuse more believable. Eventually, procrastination stops feeling like a temporary habit. It starts feeling like your personality. But here's the good news. It isn't. Decisiveness is a skill. Like any skill, it improves with practice. Think about a firefighter. When an emergency happens, they don't freeze because they've already practiced making decisions under pressure. A pilot doesn't panic every time there's turbulence. A surgeon doesn't spend an hour debating every movement during an operation. Years of experience have trained them to make thoughtful decisions without becoming trapped by hesitation. The same principle applies to everyday life. The more decisions you make, the better you become at making them. That's because your confidence isn't coming from positive thinking, it's coming from evidence. You begin to realize something powerful. Most decisions are reversible. You choose the wrong restaurant, you eat somewhere else next time. You buy the wrong phone, you'll replace it eventually. You accept a job that isn't the right fit, you gain experience and move on. Even bigger decisions often aren't as permanent as we imagine. Life gives us more chances than fear would have us believe. One reason overthinkers struggle is because they secretly believe every decision has to be perfect, as if one mistake will ruin everything. But that's almost never how life works. Success is usually built on a series of imperfect decisions followed by small adjustments. Think about learning to drive. The first time behind the wheel feels terrifying. You're constantly checking mirrors, watching your speed, thinking about every movement. Months later, you barely notice yourself doing those same actions. Driving didn't become easier because the roads changed. It became easier because you changed. Your brain adapted through repetition. Decision-making works exactly the same way. The more you practice, the less energy each decision requires. Eventually, what once felt impossible becomes routine. There's another reason decisive people often move ahead faster. They don't expect certainty before taking action. Instead, they create certainty through action. Imagine two entrepreneurs launching similar businesses.
The first spends a year designing the perfect logo, building the perfect website, and waiting for the perfect moment. The second creates something simple and launches within a month. Which one starts getting customer feedback first? Which one starts improving faster? Which one begins earning real income sooner? The second. Not because their first version is better, because reality is the best teacher. You learn more from 1 month of real experience than 1 year of endless planning. Many people underestimate how quickly life rewards movement. Every conversation creates another conversation. Every customer introduces another customer. Every opportunity leads to another opportunity. Momentum works like compound interest. Small actions grow into larger results. But momentum only begins after you move, not before. Here's something else worth remembering. You don't have to feel confident before acting. This is one of the biggest misconceptions people have. They think confidence comes first, then action. In reality, it's usually the opposite. Action comes first, confidence follows. A child doesn't become confident before learning to walk. They fall, stand up, fall again. Eventually, walking becomes natural. Adults often expect life to work differently. We want confidence before making the phone call, before starting the business, before speaking in public, before asking someone out. But confidence rarely arrives through waiting. It arrives through experience. The people you admire probably felt nervous too. The difference is they didn't treat fear as a stop sign. They treated it as part of the journey. They understood that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more than fear. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. Life doesn't belong to people who never feel uncertain. It belongs to people who are willing to move despite uncertainty. Because opportunities don't wait for perfect confidence. They respond to action. The people who keep moving won't always get everything right, but they'll almost always be farther ahead than those who spend their lives waiting for the perfect moment that never comes.
Most people think the biggest obstacles in life are external. Not enough money, not enough connections, not enough experience, not enough opportunities. Sometimes those things are real, but more often than we'd like to admit, the biggest obstacle is happening inside our own minds. It's the conversation we have with ourselves before we ever take action. Maybe I'm not ready. What if I fail? What if people laugh at me? What if I make the wrong decision? That voice sounds reasonable. It sounds responsible. Sometimes it even sounds intelligent. But if you listen carefully, you'll notice something. It rarely encourages growth. Its main job is to keep you comfortable. Your brain is designed to protect you, not to make you successful. Thousands of years ago, avoiding unnecessary risks helped people survive. Today, your brain often reacts to a job interview the same way it once reacted to a wild animal. Your heart beats faster. Your palms sweat. Your mind starts imagining worst-case scenarios. Logically, you know you're not in danger, but emotionally, your brain doesn't always know the difference. That's why fear feels so convincing. It isn't proof that something is wrong. It's simply your brain trying to keep everything familiar. The problem is that growth almost never happens inside what's familiar. Think about every important milestone in your life. The first day at a new school, your first job, learning to drive, giving a presentation, moving to a new place. At the time, every one of those experiences probably felt uncomfortable, maybe even terrifying. Now they're simply part of your story. What changed? Not the situation. You did. You adapted. Humans are remarkably good at adapting. Unfortunately, many people never give themselves the chance. Instead of facing discomfort, they organize their lives around avoiding it. They avoid difficult conversations. They avoid taking risks. They avoid asking questions. They avoid hearing the word no. At first, avoidance feels like relief. If you don't apply for the promotion, you can't be rejected. If you don't ask someone out, they can't turn you down. If you don't start the business, it can't fail. Solved. Or so it seems. But avoidance has a hidden price. Every time you avoid something because of fear, your brain quietly learns a dangerous lesson. Fear was right. The next challenge feels even bigger. The next opportunity feels even scarier. Over time, your comfort zone becomes smaller while your fears become larger. Eventually, you aren't making decisions based on what you want. You're making decisions based on what you hope to avoid. That's a completely different way of living. Now compare that with someone who acts despite feeling nervous. Do they still experience fear? Absolutely. The difference is that they don't expect fear to disappear before taking action. They understand that fear often travels with progress. Imagine two people standing at the edge of a cold swimming pool. The first person dips one toe into the water every few minutes. Maybe it'll warm up. They wait. They hesitate. They overthink. 30 minutes later, they're still standing at the edge. The second person takes a deep breath and jumps in. For a few seconds, the water feels freezing. Then something amazing happens. Their body adjusts. The discomfort fades. The water that once seemed unbearable becomes completely normal. Life works in a very similar way. Many fears feel overwhelming before you act. They're surprisingly manageable after you begin. That's why action is so powerful. It doesn't just change your circumstances, it changes your perception. You realize the presentation wasn't as scary as you imagined. The interview wasn't as intimidating as you expected. The conversation wasn't nearly as awkward as it seemed in your head. Your imagination usually creates a much harsher reality than life itself. There's another trap that keeps people stuck. They believe confidence comes first. They think, once I feel confident, then I'll start. But confidence doesn't work that way. Think about any skill you've ever learned. Did you become confident before learning it? Of course not. Nobody feels confident riding a bicycle before they've ridden one. Nobody feels confident speaking a new language before they've practiced. Nobody feels confident running a marathon before they start training. Confidence is earned. It grows from repeated action. Every small success tells your brain, I've done this before, I can do it again. Every challenge you survive becomes evidence that you're more capable than you thought. This is why decisive people often appear naturally confident. You're only seeing the finished product. You're not seeing the hundreds of uncomfortable decisions that built that confidence over the years. Every successful entrepreneur has heard no. Every successful salesperson has lost customers. Every successful author has received criticism. Every successful athlete has lost competitions. Failure didn't destroy them, it educated them. That's an important distinction. People who avoid failure also avoid learning. People who accept failure as feedback improve much faster. Instead of asking, what if I fail? They ask, what can I learn if I do? That single shift changes everything. Because failure is rarely the opposite of success. More often, it's part of the path to success. The people who accomplish extraordinary things aren't fearless. They're simply unwilling to let fear make their decisions. They've realized something that many people never fully understand. Every year you spend avoiding discomfort is a year someone else spends growing stronger. Every opportunity you hesitate to take becomes an opportunity someone else is willing to grab. Life keeps moving. Markets keep changing. Technology keeps evolving. People keep building. The world doesn't pause while we make up our minds, and neither should we. One of the greatest skills you can develop isn't becoming fearless, it's becoming comfortable with uncertainty. You stop demanding guarantees. You stop expecting perfect timing. You stop waiting until every light turns green. Instead, you learn to take the next reasonable step, then the next one, then the next one. Because clarity rarely appears at the beginning of the journey.
It appears while you're walking. The people who create meaningful lives aren't the ones who always know exactly where they're going. They're the ones who trust themselves enough to keep moving, even when the road ahead isn't perfectly clear. In the end, success is less about eliminating fear and more about refusing to let fear become the author of your life. Because the decisions that shape your future won't always feel comfortable, but they will almost always require one thing: the courage to act before you feel completely ready.
Let's end with a simple question. Who do you want to become? Not what job do you want? Not how much money do you want to make? Not what kind of house you want to live in. Who do you want to become? Because once you answer that question, your decisions become much easier. Successful people don't just build successful businesses, they build successful identities. They stop asking, "Should I do this?" Instead, they ask, "What would the person I want to become do?" That one shift changes everything. Imagine someone who wants to become healthy. Every morning they face a choice: sleep a little longer or go for a run. If they only focus on today's discomfort, staying in bed usually wins. But if they ask, "What would a healthy person do?" the answer becomes much clearer. The same idea applies to almost every area of life. A confident person doesn't wait forever before speaking up. A responsible person doesn't ignore difficult conversations. A business owner doesn't spend years waiting for perfect conditions. They make the best decision they can with the information they have, then they adjust if necessary. That's an important word: adjust. Many people think every decision is permanent. It isn't. Life is full of course corrections. Ships don't travel across the ocean in a perfectly straight line. Airplanes constantly make tiny adjustments because of changing winds. Even your GPS recalculates the route if you miss a turn. It doesn't tell you your journey is over. It simply finds another path. Your life works the same way. Making a wrong decision doesn't mean you've ruined your future. It simply means you have new information. Use it. Learn from it. Keep moving. One mistake rarely destroys a life. Repeated hesitation often does. Here's another lesson that's worth remembering. Stop trying to optimize everything. You don't need the perfect morning routine. You don't need the perfect investment strategy. You don't need the perfect productivity app. You don't need to read 50 books before taking your first step. Perfection is a moving target. You'll never catch it. Progress, on the other hand, is available today. One phone call, one application, one workout, one difficult conversation, one chapter, one video, one decision. Small actions look insignificant in the moment, but they rarely stay small.